Turns out predicting which college freshman relationships end versus thrive is actually pretty easy. All it takes is 5 questions. 5 questions that I wish I had before 4 relationships at Cornell. I got them from Dr. Keith Witt's phenomenal, splentastic book, Loving Completely. And in it, he summarizes his insights from over 53 years of integral psychotherapy on the patterns of great relationships. What makes Witt's book so good is its holism and its insightfulness. In integral thinking, everyone's right some of the time. So these questions draw from tons of fields in order to come to general but still incredibly useful questions for how we can make better relationships. And it inspired me to make my next and hopefully my last partnership the best one yet. And you too, if you're a college freshman that's struggling with your relationship, or if you're single and want to know how to find a great relationship, how do you know what makes one? These 5 questions are going to help tremendously. So let's get right into it with question number 1. Is there erotic polarity between me and this person? My first girlfriend, Lila, and this is not a real name, of course, she was very feminine. And in contrast, back then, I was, you might be surprised, quite masculine. I was like a masculine, like a can of gasoline poured over a steak as you're searing it. She sent texts every single hour. She planned adventures. And I was very resistant because the closeness was keeping me from diving deeper into content creation and becoming financially independent and schoolwork. So the end of that relationship actually made me more feminine, and I hoped it would make things more harmonic with my future relationships. But since then, and since then, I've actually had more masculine partners because of that. Like, for example, Ruby, her masculine energy drew me in, her confidence, her agency, her drive to influence the world in a positive way. The problem was she couldn't receive others' energy well. And so, ironically, I became more like Lila in my first relationship in this one, and Ruby became more like me in my first relationship with Lila. And I didn't understand, like, why wasn't this working? I push one polarity, it doesn't work. I push the other, it doesn't work. Thankfully, Loving Completely had some answers, which is a huge part of attraction comes from the harmony between the masculine, and the feminine polarities of us and our partner. This is really cool science. It sounds very woo-woo-wee-wah, but there's actually a dynamic underlying it. So harmony doesn't mean 50-50 balance. It means a healthy appreciation of the difference between partners. Harmony is harmed too much from similarity, but it's also harmed too much by difference, like in my partnerships. So we need to learn how to harmonize them, which means recognizing where you are. And by telling you a little bit more about the drives, you can do that. So one thing before telling you about the drives is don't mistake masculine and feminine as just male versus female. There obviously are some cultural aspects that push masculine males to be more masculine and females to be more feminine, as well as biological, but that doesn't mean you can't embody it if you're the other sex. The masculine polarity in general values transcendence, autonomy, agency, doing, and order, whereas the feminine polarity values integration, communion, connection, being, and chaos. Neither is superior. They're complementary forces, like peanut butter and banana. And as I reflected in my own partnerships, you need to figure out where you are and not skew too much towards one end. So for example, me, I'm primarily masculine as an individual now, but more feminine in my relationships. I have a strong transcendent doing drive in creating stuff like this for Conscious College, but I also prefer to be a little bit more go with the flow inside of relationships, commune with the people I love instead of be completely independent. So the questions for you in order to reflect on this is, where do you actually live on the masculine and the feminine spectrum? Not where you perform, where you live. Think about your current or most recent partner. Where were they on the masculine, feminine? How did that affect your partnership inside of the relationship? And then when attraction fades in a relationship, is it possible that the polarity shifted without either person noticing? So that's the first question. The second question is, does this person maintain their physical and psychological health? Are you having fun listening? I'm having fun talking about it because these are incredible, incredible questions. So this is a big one. Health is an infinitely complex topic. I'm not going to get into it all here, but there's one particular definition I heard recently which really resonated with me. And that is, a truly healthy person takes 100% responsibility for everything they experience and do. Imagine that. Relationships require change to work. If you aren't willing to make the shifts necessary to keep the relationship going, the relationship's not going anywhere. So someone in relative health is doomed to terrible health down the road if they come towards life as a victim. And inside of this mindset of radical responsibility, there's two different things that are required to be very healthy. One is building great health habits, and the other one is being shadow savvy. So let's handle both. First one is building great health habits, which a lot of students, including me when I was younger, think means having great external habits, like going to the gym, having a calendar, seeing your friends every now and then. I'm talking, those are important, but I'm talking more about the internal habits, the relational habit of responding to your partner's bids for connection, the journaling habit of navigating your emotions when they come up, the accepting of negative thoughts non-judgmentally and compassionately so you can return to your optimal zone. These are the hidden habits that actually run a lot of you and your partner's life. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about dating in college is we screen for the external habits, but we don't screen hard enough for the internal ones. We don't notice whether the partner has good emotional regulation well enough and early enough into the process. And so that's the goal of this question, is really getting a hone on that beforehand. The other aspect is becoming shadow savvy, which I talk a lot about in my shadow journaling article and video that you can check up above. But in brief, the shadow is the parts of ourself we've attached to through addiction or allergy, often without realizing it. A shadow addiction means we're so fused with a part of ourselves that we can't see how it's running the show. Think about someone who stays constantly stimulated and never gives themselves the time to think because they know their purpose is misaligned with their major. And then you have a shadow avoidance, which is the opposite. We're so avoidant of something that it starts shaping our choices, like refusing unhealthy foods at all costs to maintain shredded body fat, for example. Shadow savviness involves building the awareness of our shadows and befriending them. And when met with radiance, these shadows actually become light. They can be the best part of our character. And when I reflect on my past relationships, the health gaps definitely become obvious. Like, for example, Lila didn't have great physical or mental habits, while I suffered from poor emotional regulation, and Ruby had poor health habits across the board. But she made up for it in so many other ways that I didn't notice. I didn't appreciate how important it was. I also looked at the external habits too much instead of the internal ones. So in the future, I want to screen for these more. And that's where I encourage you to ask yourself some questions too, is what invisible habits do you carry in your relationships? Not the ones you can see. I'm talking about the ones that you can't, that are under the surface. What shadows are you currently addicted to or allergic to that you can work on in order to make your relationships better? And if your partner took 100% responsibility for everything that they said and did, what would actually change? And ask the same question yourself. Would anything change? So that's question 2. I hope you're already starting to see the value in these questions. And you're never taught this in college. It's crazy. So the third question is also a big one. In conflict, would this person do what it takes to get back to love? To this day, there is only one time where I've ever really lost my rooting in a romantic conflict. And it's painful to think about, but it was with my last partner, Ruby. She was polyamorous and I was not. And even though I had my reservations, I loved her enough to give it a try. So I was in a relationship with her for about 5 months, and I was struggling, not necessarily just because of the polyamory, but also other things like her health habits and not asking questions enough and listening enough. And so one day I sat her down to talk about this at my apartment, and we had a long 2-hour conversation about how much I was struggling and how I wanted to see change. Otherwise, I don't think I could do this any longer. And I remember at the end of that conversation, she said, "Okay, I'll work on these things. It sounds really tough for you." And then she said something that broke my heart. She said, "By the way, is it okay if I start dating this other friend of mine?" And I wish I could say I rooted in love to respond to that one, but all I could think about was how enraged I was at the mere suggestion that you want to invest in a different relationship after I just told you I was at the hardest point of mine. All my shadows came out, and for the next 10 minutes, we only spoke through those. No real conversation, just pointless anger ricocheting off the walls. And looking back, honestly, this was the interaction that spelled the end of the relationship in many ways. And I also got more information afterward on why she said that at the time that she did, which made it slightly less bad, but it's still traumatic to this day. And the point that I wanted to make of this conversation is most students don't resolve conflict with their partners. They fight with their shadows and then mistake that as real conversation. And so to avoid this, we have to befriend those shadows beforehand so we don't smog the conversation when it matters most. So I talk a lot about that shadow journaling in my video I mentioned earlier, but we really need to return to love in our conflicts, not be rooted in our shadows. And a lot of that comes through this process called attunement, which is where we witness our emotions and our thoughts with positive, non-judgment, and caring intent. Not just ourselves, but also our partner. And if we can do that, then it's much harder for a conflict to spiral into shadow clashing, because even one person rooted in love makes it really hard for the argument to spiral. It takes two, literally. So some questions for you to reflect on because of this. Think about your last real conflict with a partner or a close friend. Were you talking to them or were you talking to your shadow? And after a fight, who walks back towards love first? Is it always the same person? How might that be affecting the relationship? Could you become that person if you're not? These are some good questions to ask. The fourth question, we're almost done, unfortunately. Would this person show up as a parent or family member? Now you might be thinking, Aiden, why is parenting showing up in an article about college relationships? And no, I am not suggesting that you have a child as one of the ways in order to make your college relationship better. But what I am suggesting is you analyze your partner for whether they embody the principles of what makes a great parent or family member. Because if someone can't show up as a family member when appropriate, they sure as heck aren't going to show up in your relationship well. And this is something I wish I'd appreciated more with Ruby. She, on the outside, was extremely caring towards her family. I remember one day there was a wedding that I went to for her cousin, and she was running around the wedding for hours, stopping her conflicts between her family members because they always conflict when they were together. And she did this for so long in single-minded focus that she didn't actually eat anything. And at first, I found this very charming and valiant. But as I thought about it more, I realized that it was actually very much shadow-driven because she got sick for a few days after this, and it actually made the family conflicts worse because of her mood from the sickness. And so I don't think that is how you should show up as a good family member. In that case, you should not feel responsibility to do that for all of your family. And I watched the opposite happen with my second girlfriend, Rena, who never spoke of her father. And I'm pretty sure that was because he was a high-positioned U.S. Army general, which I suspect does not create warm family dinner conversations. Just don't need a psychology degree in order to guess that. But one of the insights that this gave me is we carry our families into every room we enter. And so the question is whether we carry them consciously or unconsciously. There's a whole field of attachment research on how our early relationships affect the way that we form bonds in the future. It's way too much research to go into in this video, but the point is that our family relationships profoundly affect us. And the way that someone shows up in your relationship or to their family is a really good indicator of how that relationship might go. Even if they're not a parent, how do they show up to their family, and do they embody the qualities that a good parent might? So some questions you might ask is, how does your partner treat people who can't do anything for them, right? Service workers, younger siblings, strangers having a bad day. What patterns from your family do you carry into your relationships without realizing it? And then, does your partner show up to your family in a way that nourishes them or in a way that empties them? So, the last question now, and perhaps one of the most important, does this person have deep purpose while recognizing and admiring what is deeply meaningful to me? One of the things that made my first partnership with Lila so difficult is she didn't have deep enough soul's purpose for me, because for her, it was all about relationships. So she would regularly have calls with her friends, her family, and she wanted to with me as well. At that time, my soul's purpose was more in content creation and schoolwork and trying to become financially independent. So I felt like she was trying to turn our relationship into that purpose. And I remember one time in particular, I was talking about gamification with her on a car drive at Cornell, and the trees were blurring past. I was mid-sentence about game mechanics and human motivation, and I was genuinely excited. Like, this is one of the things I really care about. And then she said, "That sounds pretty cool. Let me tell you about this thing that happened with my friend yesterday." And it wasn't malicious, but it stung in a way that I couldn't articulate at the time. My excitement just hit the windshield and then flew off. The irony is her relational purpose was beautiful. Like, she cared so much about the people around her, But there was this bridge between us that neither of us knew how to navigate because of how much her purpose was wrapped up in relationships. So if your partner doesn't have a purpose of their own, they will turn your relationship into that. And that's why it's super important that you find ways to connect with your partner over each other's purposes, converse with them, engage in their meaningful stories, help them accomplish their purpose. If you're truly in partnership, their wins become your wins. So some questions that you can use to reflect on is, does your partner have something that lights them up outside of your relationship? And do you? When you share what's meaningful to you, does your partner lean in or redirect? And when they share theirs, do you? And then lastly, if this relationship ended tomorrow, would you still have a foundation of meaning to stand on? I want you to imagine a world where each and every person loved each and every person completely. What would university look like? What would politics feel like? What would the planet smell like? If there's a utopia, I think it's this, not gonna lie, but it won't come easy because navigating all 5 questions is required for yourself first. Understanding your polarity, building genuine health, learning to fight with love, showing up like family, and then connecting through purpose. None of these questions are pass/fail. They're all things that you work towards. I'm still working towards them. I'm not done. And I'm still looking for that special someone in the Netherlands, someone I'm dating right now, which could be it, but I don't know. What's helping is asking the 5 questions. And that might help you as well. So whether you're seeking or looking to make a current relationship better, keep these 5 questions close to your chest. That's it. If you like this video, you should check out my free college freshman cosmic journaling kit in the description below. It will help you grow your emotional intelligence, your self-understanding, and your purpose, many of the things necessary to build better relationships. It's got 1,000 journaling questions, it's gamified, and it takes just 15 minutes a day to do. Check that out in the description below. As always, I hope you have a phenomenal rest of your day. Eat some peanut butter, and goodbye.